Dakota Proclamation by Meredith M. Quinn. Part 3. Preface. This book was written by an Indian, classified by U.S. federal statutes as a savage. It is his journey into the world of law, history, and religion of the white man, his first encounter with the structure of an alien culture. It started with and ended in law. Just what is law? It is a science that supersedes truth, that must be perpetuated by suspicion, making it impossible for two honest men to meet in a court of law. Who was the dishonest one, the white man or the Indian? Laws were written to separate the dishonest from the honest. Law of the Indian is no different, because he too must deal with some type of dishonest complaint. Only the complaint allows no redress of the issue. As an Indian, you soon learn the difference between law and justice, truth and facts. But it is an exact science. To learn it, you can play the dishonest game of the white man and change the course of events. Such was an opportunity given me in the fishing rights case held in Tacoma, Washington, January 1971. 54 Indians went free from the charges of failing to disperse from unlawful assemble and unlawful assemble. The truth was that Indians were fishing from Indian land by the Treaty of the Indian Fishing Right, upheld by the Supreme Court. It is today the greatest court case of injustice that broke every law that this nation had laid foundations to ensure unbiased review and conclusions to a fair trial to anyone entering court procedures. It showed the prosecution a totalitarian force, with the defense having no redress. No attorney dares tell that it could only be done without attorneys. The state of Washington will never be the same because it helped to prove some very important facts. Quote, "No court in the American judicial system can judge the Indian and his problem fairly by law. Any attorney licensed to practice law in the United States could not present or represent Indian rights in a court of law. By law, the Indian did not have the right to a jury of his peers. The Indian could not present evidence on his own behalf in a court of law. The Indian did not have the right to the writ of mandamus, that he was not a citizen of the United States, nor could he ask for review of jurisdiction of his rights in a civil court. He could not present his land or treaty rights in a court of law. As an Indian using this exacting science of the white man now blew the hell out of the concept, land of the free and the home of the brave. For showing how to use these tricks in law of the Indian, I became the undisputed authority on Indian law and jurisdiction without being legal counsel or an attorney. But why did these attorneys, Indians, and other activists fear my presence? Because by law, quote, the Indian cannot commit the act of treason, but the Indian must lead and control confrontations, and it must encompass his exact legal problem. If the Indian did this, it would return the control of his problem back to him, and so eliminate the profit that others enjoyed that had set up research and study programs to be the authority of the Indian problem. The government had to look to these self-made authorities to answer charges and complaints of reservations and Indians. These authorities of the Indian problem, controlling activists and keeping complaints and problems ahead of research and data, became the scavengers of the century. A suppressed people, an experiment in poverty and slavery, became an enterprising business to write about that gave above-average, middle-class annual incomes along with an educational degree and community recognition. The complex legal Indian problems promised many fruitful years of employment, as long as the area of research remained outside of the exclusive control of the Secretary of the Interior, President, and Congress. Now, it was clear why these authorities would not support my research and activities. That was almost always certain victory for the Indian and his problem. It was in the area of exclusive control that only an Indian had the right to use. I was not the undisputed authority of the Indian legal problem, but the Indian that could fit and encompass the exact legal acts to the problems, which was my right, being a member of an Indian nation recognized by treaty with the United States. What these authorities were refusing to let the public notice was a very important moral and legal issue. The Indian, who is part of the human race, and with an issue superseding all other crises in the world today, did not have a trusted media within the civilized nations of the world that would prevent further programs of genocide. Even a harder realization the Indian had to face was that truth is not a prerequisite of man's philosophies or religions, from which all law draws its basis and structure. It is this knowledge that all humanist clubs or organizations operating in the United States must, by allegiance, prejudice their findings and conclusions, thereby closing their doors to any religious or charitable functions as being the guardian of standards for mankind, but political and educational instruments in areas of deceit.